Rebecca is,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, this is kind of a sidetrack, but Rebecca is messaging. She's trying to get into the class and is asking, she says she needs the the meeting number and password. Do you know where I would find that?
Yeah, I will put it in the chat. Let me just kind of
Okay.
pull that up.
Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, I just sent an email around with it. So I got it here.
Is it in the email?
Yeah, I'm just gonna put it in the chat. It's in the email that I gotta send around, but I gotta just send it to
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I see it. I don't know why she's asking for it then, because, yeah. Okay, sorry. I didn't realize it was in that email.
No.
Okay.
And it should, did anyone, oh, here's Lacia. Did anyone try and go in via the Blackboard kind of collaborate link?
I did. It worked fine.
Did you didn't have like, I don't think you, so I think what ends up happening is if you go to the link, you get put into a waiting room and then I let you in, or anyone in the class lets you in because I've made you all co-hosts so that you can do it. But I don't think you're required to do any of that when you come in via the George Brown or the Collaborate link.
Right.
So it might be easier just for folks to just use that link if they can, but I will still send the URL around. Yeah, I think that certain browser does seem to make a difference as well.
Yeah. I suggested that to Rebecca and she said she wasn't being able to access through the Blackboard for some reason.
Okay. All right. And yeah, last week there was something going on with Blackboard Collaborate. We could not access it via that link, but that's fixed now. So technology, what are you going to do? All right. So I'm going to start with my sharing my screen. I'm going to pull that in. Sorry, I'm just pulling in all the PowerPoint presentations here. There we go. So one of the things I'm going to do a little bit of a switch around. All right. So one of the things I'm going to be doing a little bit quickly. So don't, but please feel free to stop me because, and then if you could also, oh, sorry, we're getting some. All right. And then please, if you do see anyone in there, I'm going to try and keep an eye on it, but I might get distracted. So if you could let anyone in who needs to get in. So we did do a little bit of kind of a quick kind of run through on the overall Earth systems that are like, this is just the way it is. This system exists. It's been here for 4.5 billion years. And whether you like it or not, humanity, if you mess with it, you mess with it, and you're going to end up kind of having implications associated with it. So we did go to discuss about the water cycle, how different water cycles, kind of some are longer water cycles, some are shorter cycles. You can imagine like if it rains, it's ocean evaporation happens from the ocean, builds the clouds, it precipitates back down, and it ends up falling in back into the ocean. Pretty quick water cycle that took place there. But you could also think of it from a different perspective of a water cycle evaporates from lakes and rivers, ends up going onto the mountain tops, forms a glacier, sits there for 400,000 years, and then melts, and then it goes back into the water cycle. So that's a much longer water cycle. You can imagine that one taking a long time. Groundwater, getting into the groundwater system, while it varies depending on the different groundwater aquifers, but that is another area that kind of is a slow water cycle circle, but then there's other quick ones associated with it. So I did want to kind of highlight, we all kind of grew up with the water cycle as part of our science and environment kind of education. What we didn't give enough credit to and enough time to educate all of us on is the carbon cycle and how important the carbon cycle is to Earth systems as a whole. And the roles that there is, again, a quick carbon cycle, which would probably be very simple. The one, let's say a quick carbon cycle is I've got a plant right beside me here, and it's doing its photosynthesis thing. And it is taking in carbon dioxide and giving me oxygen. And I'm sitting here breathing beside it, and I'm breathing in the oxygen and giving it carbon dioxide. Super fast carbon cycle. But then you could also think of it from the perspective of the rocks, like the erosion that takes place. Whenever mountain chains are eroded, they draw down CO2. And that's largely because what ends up happening is the water cycle plays a huge part in the carbon cycle. As water falls on land, it creates carbonic, let's just say like it erodes the rock surfaces. That releases carbon from the rock system and puts it into the water kind of system as part of it goes. So there's interactions between the water cycle and the carbon cycle as part of that. But one of the key things that we don't actually give enough credit to is that building up mountain chains will draw down CO2 because erosion takes place. It is just that we can't rely on erosion to solve our climate change challenges, because that takes place at a completely different time frame than what humanity uses as a time frame. That takes millions of years to adjust carbon levels. We don't have a billion years to wait for erosion to draw down our carbon cycles. We got to do that ourselves. So that's just a little bit of idea about our carbon cycle. I did want to highlight that the carbon cycle has been really important in overall 4.5 billion years. Every single time period of Earth's era, the carbon cycle has played a big influence in terms of what impacts it has on Earth and what impacts it has on life. Did want to highlight the greenhouse gas effect. The greenhouse gas effect is not the problem. That greenhouse effect is really important on creating livable conditions here on Earth for us. So we want the greenhouse effect. What we don't want is the extra CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions we're releasing into the atmosphere that is now creating more and more blankets over our Earth within our atmosphere that is keeping and retaining more heat in the Earth. So we did go through. One of the things I did really want to highlight, and I don't know if this is something that I'm a total geek on this stuff, but when you really stop and think about it, the Earth's been around for 4.5 billion years. And for the most part of that time, actually right up into the Proterozoic. So like up until 550 million years ago, life on Earth was about unicellular life. It was algae, bacteria, archaea, simple life forms. It wasn't terribly complex. And then some sort of magic happened in the Cambrian period. And there is some life that kind of takes place in Proterozoic, but mainly it's the kind of Cambrian time period, and life just blooms. Is it a coincidence that our oxygen levels in our atmosphere changed around that 600 million time period? Because before then, oxygen wasn't really a big component of our atmosphere. So therefore, we know that the changing in our atmosphere, which was created by unicellular life, we would not have any oxygen in our atmosphere that we would be able to breathe if it wasn't for a single unicellular photosynthetic algae cyanobacteria. We owe a debt of gratitude to those single unicellular life forms for giving us the atmosphere. But when they started creating oxygen, life flourished, and complexity of life just like kicked it up a notch. But it's really quite fascinating. And what I really wanted to highlight about this is that we're in the Holocene. It's the last 10,000 years. The last time period of this one is really about human civilization. Humanity has been around for, you could kind of say that it's been around for 300,000, maybe 150,000. People are still debating on what's the actual number. Our primate, like great ape species, would have been the last 8 million years that we've been around. So you can imagine we're newcomers to this whole kind of life symphony, but we have made a hell of an impact in the short time we've been on this Earth. And when you hear, I sometimes get into the climate change deniers who say like, we're too insignificant, we can't make changes. And I was like, so you're telling me that a cyanobacteria, a unicellular, it seems pretty insignificant too. And that gave us an atmosphere of oxygen that it was conducive to life for, you know, the last 500, 600 million years. So you can't say that humans are insignificant. We have impacts associated with it. So the nitrogen cycle, we did talk about nutrients, and for the longest time, nutrients were like a kind of a whole limitation factor in life and how much life, like how much population could take place. But the nitrogen cycle and the phosphorus cycle are two main places where they get the nutrients. And you can imagine, like remember I was talking about last week about life didn't come onto land until about, you know, let's just say 400 million years ago. And when it did come on, so just before then, the only thing that the land provided was that it actually it created erosion taking place from rocks that brought nutrients into water systems, which then made it available for life. So prior to that, prior to life coming onto Earth, the only way nutrients got into the ocean was through the erosion of rocks. But when life came onto Earth, then life of plants started breaking up the rock a hell of a lot more than just rain does, because soil, roots, roots and then building soil. So organic matter started feeding into the phosphorus and nitrogen cycle from as well. We spoke about how you can have too much of a good thing, and too much phosphorus and nitrogen in the system will create eutrophication, which creates a blooming of life, which then when that life dies, when it decomposes, it uses up oxygen in the water, and that creates dead zones. There are huge sections of dead zones in many places around the world. And probably one of the areas that's suffered the most from it in the last number of years has been the Gulf of Mexico, as well as in our Great Lakes system. Poor little Lake Erie is the one that is the canary in the coal mine who suffers from eutrophication. So one of the things I didn't go into last year is we didn't really talk about carbon capture and sequestration. So there's no doubt, as far as there's no doubt we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. There's no doubt about it. But there is also the kind of elements of carbon capture and sequestration. Now, there is the ability to fall into the trap the fossil fuel industry likes to give us, which is like, don't worry about all our fossil fuels. We'll just bring in carbon capture, without recognizing how much it's going to cost to do that carbon capture. And that's just doubling down on a fossil fuel system that we know we have to change inevitably. So don't fall into the carbon capture will solve our problems on climate change, hopeful thinking. I'm not saying it's not part of the solution. It's just not the solution. It's not the only solution. And we have to change our systems and address our GHG emissions throughout our thinking. But it is something that I think we still have to invest in as a society, but we also need to ensure reducing deforestation. If we're going to be kind of serious about carbon capture, one, we have to stop deforestation. We really have to kind of protect old forests because they're the best at capturing carbon. We also have to do a whole lot of reforestation and wetland restoration. Wetlands are huge carbon sinks. We really have never given wetlands the credit they deserve for not only being the carbon sinks, but also for ecosystem services in terms of flood protection, in terms of habitat. We've just called them swamplands and dredged them and built subdivisions on them. And wetlands have never gotten the respect that they deserve. There's also a whole bunch of carbon capture opportunities in agricultural practices, largely through soil management, but it's a huge opportunity and we need to invest in that as well a lot more. So in terms of sequestration, one of the things, again, this is really, it is very expensive at present. It doesn't mean that it would be expensive into the future. The goal is that price always is high at the start of a technology and then reduces as you get some efficiency of scale taking place. But one thing to fall into, the one thing to avoid in the greenwashing, how to keep an eye on greenwashing, is that when you hear that coming from governments and you hear that coming from certainly the fossil fuel industry, it's often used as a bit of a panacea, or kind of like, take a chill pill. It's okay, you don't need to worry about all our fossil fuel use. We're just going to capture all that carbon and store it in some store it somehow, some way. It's very much along the lines of how we handle a lot of our nuclear waste at this point in time, which is, don't worry about it. We're just storing it and we'll figure it out what we do later. Sorry. So funny. What a funny species we are. Yes, they absolutely filter our groundwater too.
That's a nice way to say it. Funny species. That's a nice
We
way.
are a funny species, yes. Let's go with that word.
Yeah.
I did want to kind of raise a little bit about bioengineering. There have been some folks who have been kind of touting this as the solution to our climate change challenge. And what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of bioengineering?
We just saw this one thing in our global politics class where they took 2% of the water away from something and created this huge diverse wetland. And I've also heard or know of on my own, because I was curious about how people can change deserts. But apparently in the 1930s, they had a make work project in the Depression where they made a bunch of swales in, I think it was Arizona.
Yeah.
And they're all green today because like swales are basically these huge big ditches.
Yeah.
And so they naturally collect more water so that plant growths can grow there naturally.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I think of when it comes to bioengineering.
Okay, so that is actually, it is, well, yes, you're absolutely right. It is a form of bioengineering. Actually, I will totally say it's probably a less harmful or less likely to have unintended consequences bioengineering because it's recreating natural systems already and using nature to help us solve these problems. There is some really good examples. What I think is so fascinating is that it just really does kind of highlight how much a role life plays in determining what happens on our Earth. But you can think about it from the perspective during in China, the Gobi Desert was just expanding so much, and they did undertake an effort to do reforestation to create a bit of a green buffer for keeping the Gobi Desert from flying into agricultural lands that were really, really important to China, and it worked super well. So I'm just hunting down for that. And now they're actually in the process of building it's almost like building a green belt near the Sahara Desert to keep it from going into the lower countries, to keep the Sahara Desert from expanding. So I'm just gonna see if I can find some images that I would share. Okay, let's see, we're just gonna try this one.
We have this entire misunderstanding of what Darwin really meant when he said survival of the fittest.
We're gonna change that.
Process of China. A chunk of history. When you think about big countries like China, they have a big population to maintain with a massive land space of 3.5 million square miles. But the thing is that only 12% of that land is arable. And with that land, China is feeding 22% of the world population. Quite a feat to achieve, don't you think? But there is one thing that was creating some concern for the China government, and it was the Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert blankets nearly 500,000 miles of northern China and southern Mongolia in a dry, arid land, cutting between the two countries. While the government no longer fears invaders cutting through the desert and attacking Beijing, the rapid desertification of China's northern region poses quite a risk to the country and its people. The Gobi is the fastest growing desert on Earth, transforming nearly 2,250 miles of grassland per year into an inhospitable wasteland. This expansion eats away at space that was once fit for agriculture and creates unbridled sandstorms that batter cities near the edge of the desert. This process is known as desertification, where land areas turn into deserts, and the causes are both man-made and climate-induced. Deforestation, overgrazing, and overuse of water by people are some of the leading factors responsible for desertification. Government awareness. Desertification has been the enemy of China for quite a long time now, and as one of the developed countries of the world, its governments couldn't just sit there and watch their precious farmlands turn into deserts. China has been battling large-scale desertification since at least
Okay, we're going to skip through. I will put this link into it, but we're going to skip
have
through.
now almost disappeared from the map. At the beginning of this century, around 27% of China was covered in desert. And thanks to all the initiatives taken by the government, the number came down to 18% by 2020. Beyond the Great Green Wall, China has taken other measures to stem the growth of deserts. A series of laws passed beginning in the early 2000s, and scientists are looking for more and more ways to make the whole project run smoothly. At the 2021 National People's Congress, China's leadership committed to new goals to increase the total area of land covered by forests from 23% to 24% by 2025. Is it all good? Although the Great Green Wall project is showing much promise, this doesn't mean it is free from any drawbacks. There are some pitfalls to mass tree planting. In southwestern China, researchers have found that farmers were cutting down native vegetation so they could collect money for sowing non-native plants in the government program. Then there are water shortages. Large parts of China, including some areas where trees are being planted, are becoming drier. Introducing thirsty, non-native trees to northern China as part of the project has absorbed dwindling groundwater resources in regions where rain is really scarce. This creates a vicious cycle whereby the new trees take what's left of the water and then perish along with other plant species around them. A 2019 study found that semi-arid areas in China grew by 33% between 1994 and 2008, compared to between 1948 and 1962. According to a study in 2004, only 15% of the trees planted since 1978 have survived. But news of relief is that the National Forestry Department has recognized the era of planting trees in arid areas, and that in recent years, the department and local governments have moved towards planting shrubs with lower water requirements. The head of the Forestry Department, Zhang Jianlong, said that the effort should go towards keeping vegetation healthy.
So I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight on that one. Just gonna stop sharing for a sec. Yeah, and there's another, there's the efforts taking place in to undertake a very much the similar green wall in Saudi Arabia. Lots of shrubs grow in the Australian outback, yes. So, but it's really interesting that you kind of, even when you have the best of intentions and what you're doing makes total logical sense, you can see that if you don't kind of bring a whole bunch of different various perspectives into it, you can create gaps in your programming that, again, you're planting kind of like water intensive trees in a desert area is probably not a great strategy for how you're going to create your green wall. But you learn about this. And again, I would bet you if they had done a little bit more diverse engagement with getting different people to help design what they were going to do with the green wall, that would have come out It's not like it's like, how could this happen? We never saw this happening. So you can see exactly how a variety of different stakeholder perspectives really can help highlight different potential unintended consequences that are the project's not aiming to achieve, but it happens just by gaps in design or gaps in consideration and perspectives. So I did want to kind of highlight, I will throw in some additional kind of questions on that one, but I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and pull up this one. So some of the bioengineering that I did want to raise is kind of a little bit on the kind of evil scientist bioengineering. And I'm being facetious when I say that. It's not like what they're just doing on that is using biological systems and then integrating that into other systems to try and see if that can kind of help address the problems. I would say one of the things, like, for example, it's interesting to do that, but please do that in an experiment. Don't just do that in the real world and see, I don't know, I don't think there'll be other unintended consequences associated with messing with these systems. But one of the examples on this one is it's a really interesting example, and it highlights the vulnerabilities that we all face when bioengineering is going to be tried to be pushed as the solution to our climate change challenges. So what ends up happening on this one is they try to seed iron into the ocean, because it would help to get the phytoplankton populations to increase, and that would remove CO2. I don't know how I guess they were thinking that, again, these phytoplankton do die at some point in time, but I thought they figured there wasn't quite as much that you would cause a eutrophication to take place. But it is something that you, again, have unintended consequences that you could, that can be detrimental to the ecosystem. But one of the most important things about this is that we do not have an international governance system which would allow individual countries, like, we don't have an international governance body that would determine, say yes or no to what different countries want to try with their bioengineering projects. So if we are going to be using bioengineering, one, we better not use it right from the get-go to try and not change our ways. We have a huge systemic challenge in terms of moving away from fossil fuels in our overall system, and no amount of bioengineering is going to change that fact that we have to do that. In addition, I'm not saying I would rule it out if we start having, and we might go into some of the kind of the positive feedback loops as anything. I'm not saying I would never do it at 30 years down the road if we realize humanity's just messed up royally, and all the permafrost, methane from the permafrost is being released into the atmosphere. And well, we're not going to go into those kind of scenarios as far as it goes, but it certainly should not be our go-to position for how we solve the climate change challenge. So I just wanted to kind of get it on your radar. And we have no international body that can play any checks and balances in that system. So I'm not sure I feel confident letting countries make those decisions on their own. Yes, almonds are a water hog in the agricultural sector, and regrown coral, yes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about coral. Actually, I want to talk a little bit about coral because they are, again, when we were talking about canaries in the coal mine, and I mentioned how Lake Erie is a little bit of the canary in the coal mine for the Great Lakes. Well, coral reefs are kind of like the canary in the coal mine for our whole ocean ecosystem. And coral reefs, as beautiful as they are, as amazing as they are a bit of the fainting Nelly in the ecosystem, as I like to call them. They're gorgeous, but they're like, no, it's too hot. No, it's too cold. No, the pH is too low. No, the pH is too high. They like to be within a very specific range. They don't want it too hot. They don't want it too cold. They don't want the pH too low. They don't want the pH too high. And if the conditions aren't absolutely right for them, they're like, I don't want to stay in this world anymore, and they die. it's not their fault. It's just the way they're made. But let's say, for example, they take calcium from the ocean. They take calcium from the ocean and they build their skeletons with that. But they can only do that taking calcium from the ocean under a very narrow band of pH. Ocean acidification is another climate change impact that scares the hell out of a lot of people. And what that really means is that ocean acidification means that as the atmosphere increases in carbon dioxide, there is an enormous amount of exchange that takes place between the ocean and the gases in the ocean and the atmosphere and the gases in the atmosphere. And there's constant exchange taking place between the ocean and our atmosphere. In fact, the ocean, thank you, ocean, absorbs about 50% of the CO2 that we emit into the atmosphere every single year. The oceans just take that up and absorb that into them. They do pay a price for absorbing all of that carbon dioxide. They means that their pH and they become more acidic than they normally would because that carbon dioxide is being converted into carbonic acid in the ocean. So it lowers the pH of the ocean. And even though it seems very, very tiny, and like you think about it, how could anything actually change the atmosphere? Like the ocean seems so immense, but so does the atmosphere. And we realize that we do have impacts on that. And small changes can lead to big results. So even with the narrow banding of the narrow changes in the pH, it is enough to make it so that it's not a conducive ecosystem for coral, which means that at lower pHs, it can absorb the calcium it needs to build its skeletons. It also means that how it has a symbiotic relationship with an algae that is part of its kind of ecosystem. And that algae also, after it gets too hot, the coral will expel that algae. And it's okay. And that's where you get the coral bleaching. That's what the coral bleaching means, is that the coral, because it's been under so much stress in terms of its ecosystem environmental conditions, that it expels its algae because it's not going to support it anymore. It needs to just kind of concentrate, and kind of that's the coral bleaching process. Now, one coral bleaching won't kill a whole coral reef. They will, when the conditions get better, they will kind of recruit more algae to play that role, symbiotic role, and share it on the nutrients and resource collection that coral reefs and the algae do together. But if this happens too often and the environment conditions are still inhospitable for the very specific conditions that coral reefs like, then what you do is you get dead coral reef systems. And as much as this is something that you're like, oh, that's so sad, they're so pretty. And it's not just an aesthetic loss, it's which is a big loss in itself. Don't get me wrong. Coral reefs are so gorgeous, such an amazing ecosystem. But what's really amazing about them is that they serve as the nurseries for our oceans. There are the nurseries for our fisheries. And more than 1 billion people rely on fish as their main source of protein. And when we lose coral reefs and that nursery, we are going to have consequences happening in the whole fish population ecosystem. So coral reefs are not just pretty, and yes, they are fainting Nellies, and they're very, very particular of what they will like and not like, but they also play a really important role in the overall ocean ecosystem. Mangroves are the other nurseries that are really important to protect, because that's where you find a lot more of the younger fish and also fish habitat as a whole. But besides that, they're so gorgeous. Any questions on coral reefs? But that's one of the reasons why ocean acidification is such a concern, is because it will have implications on coral reefs. And that will have implications on fishery stocks. And there are work taking place to find less fainting Nelly corals that can withstand a little bit more differentiation in environmental conditions. There's some, I think, from the Pacific that have been found to be more temperature and pH tolerant, and there is work taking place to try and repopulate those types of corals into areas like, let's say, for example, in the Great Barrier Reef, which has been really hard hit over the last number of years due to ocean conditions and coral bleaching taking place. And that's largely the result of higher ocean temperatures that have caused that one, but ocean acidification also makes the coral reefs more vulnerable to changes in temperature as well. But anyone who really wants coral reefs, get it done in the next decade. Get your scuba diving adventures in then. Okay, you have to laugh. Otherwise, you just cry. All right, any questions on coral reefs? It is just gorgeous. How about questions on ocean acidification?
Can you explain how that occurs a little bit more? Like you said, it because it's from the carbonic acid. For some
Yeah.
reason, I had the idea that it was also caused by runoff from farmers' fields as well.
No, you're thinking that would be the nutrients and eutrophication.
That's
So
what?
the eutrophication. So that's
Oh.
like when extra nutrients find their way into a water body. Could be a lake, doesn't matter whether it's salt or fresh water. But what ends up happening, there's just so much nutrients in the water that you get this bloom of phytoplankton, algae, depending on what's kind of the main unicellular one that's just going to be like, we got nutrients, we're going to grow. And you get this huge growth of algae or bacteria. And then what ends up happening, it dies, it falls down to the bottom of the lake or the ocean. And because it then when it decomposes, it releases all of that all as well. And it sucks up the oxygen because oxygen is needed in that decomposition process. And if it sucks up so much oxygen that's in the water, that means there's less oxygen that living plants and animals need to survive. It's particularly hard for fish because plants have a lot more flexibility on that and they don't need as much oxygen. But for fish, it's a big issue, and the eutrophication will have a huge amount of impacts on the fisheries and the fish that live in that body of water that got too much nutrients coming into it. And I will put some things on ocean acidification, but what it comes down to is you increase carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Not only is there more carbon dioxide that gets into precipitation, which forms carbonic acid, and that would, that creates more erosion, but you also get this exchange of gases taking place between the ocean, not the whole ocean, but the first kind of like upper layer of the ocean. There's constant exchange between the ocean and the atmosphere. If CO2 levels are going up in the atmosphere, they're going to be going up in the ocean as well. It's just that when it gets absorbed into the ocean, it turns into carbonic acid than it is, and not carbon dioxide. So there's a chemical reaction that takes place. And I will put some questions on that. Yes, and we do get a lot of algae blooms in Lake Erie. Poor Lake Erie.
I have a question
Fred.
just about bioengineering. So you're saying that, there's so much disadvantage to it, which is true, because there's not a lot of like research and data around the information, right?
Yeah.
But also, like when I was doing my research, I saw like how bioengineering is helping to like reduce or mitigate some of the climate crisis. So yeah, I think it really depends on how it's used, and why.
And how much we know about the unintended consequences.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Because like, let's just say, for example, if you were going to use like tree planting or creating a green wall across a desert, or like to keep that, we know that there's probably going to be unintended consequences in the same way they learned, in the fact that they were planting trees that were using too much water. And that's one unintended consequence that you're kind of like, okay, you know, like we can adjust on that one. And you're recreating natural systems anyway. But dumping a whole bunch of iron into an ocean, part of the ocean, and then seeing, I don't know, let's see what happens, and running those experiments in the real world where you don't even know the unintended consequences of what you've done, that is something that we got to be extremely cautious of.
Yeah, and I also, I'm like reflecting on when, let's say, you introduce like a foreign species, whether it's a plant or, you know, an animal, into an environment, you can see how it destroys that food chain, that system.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just more of like having the right research and the right like information before these things are done.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree on that one. You got to know exactly how this is going to play out. And no one will ever know everything on that one. But like, let's say another one that's kind of like a very kind of daunting is there has been talk of sulfur seeding in the atmosphere, so that sulfur would actually kind of help to actually, I'm not going to even go there because I don't know enough about it, but we're going to go more into it. There's other ones, again, that's kind of like, there's like, you're looking at it thinking like, this could end really badly. But I'll do a little bit more research on the one I'm thinking of, because I don't have the information I need on it to be, I don't want to give the wrong information. But again, there is, again, kind of like things like things like putting reflectors out into space as part of satellites, like throwing a whole bunch of satellites into space so that it reflects more solar energy back into space. And I was like, seriously, is that really where you want to go in this? Like, we can do better. We can figure out how to change our fossil fuel energy system. That would probably be a lot easier than getting all these reflectors into space. Just saying. But it's so it just like, I keep an open mind. Like, I think we need every tool in the toolbox. I am not saying that we don't need every tool in the toolbox. Just be very conscientious about like silver bullets being thrown at us as the solution, because honestly, there isn't one silver bullet on this climate change challenge, and that's what makes it so difficult. It is, and like, fossil fuels are so much a part of our overall society. But we will go digging into that a little bit more. But I did want to give coral reefs a little bit of their time. Okay, so I did want to I get sidetracked. So I am going to just do this really quickly on the bioengineering, because I missed that at the last class. So we're just gonna finish. Sorry, let me see what I just did with that. Oh, here it is. Where's the, here? Okay. Okay, so we did go a little bit into the ocean currents, the garbage patches. I really wanted to kind of give you, I didn't want to start on this one. I did want to kind of throw this into the chat. There are some really interesting things taking place to address our ocean garbage patch issues. Probably the ocean cleanup is probably one of the most successful ones to date. But again, it just highlights the really important things. Yes, we're going to have to do something about these garbage patches, and we are going to have to clean it up. But what we have to do more than anything is prevent this from happening in the first place. Because if we don't get our garbage not going into water bodies, we will continually have more and more garbage patches and bigger garbage patches that are going to be really expensive to try and deal with. So again, this is kind of like the end of pipe solution versus stopping the problem from happening in the first place. But I did want to kind of highlight, don't get too depressed on that one. there is some work taking place on this. It's finally getting the recognition and the I'm not saying we're anywhere close to solving it, but at least we're moving into the stage where we're no longer talking about the problem and we are working on the solution on that one. I did want to kind of highlight microplastics. Microplastics are something that really, really highlights the importance of stopping problems from happening in the first place. Because as you can see, it's one thing to clean up this type of stuff. Can you imagine trying to clean up microplastics from the ocean or any water body ecosystem? Like, how would you even do that? Outside of like, I don't even know how you would do that, get microplastics out. And all of these plastics, which are largely plastics in there, will eventually degrade to being microplastics if it's not removed from the ecosystem. It will break down, it just breaks into smaller pieces of plastic. Okay, so I did want to kind of go into a little bit of a recap. I wanted to go into a recap with what we covered yesterday. Now we're going to go into breakout groups. And so I did want to highlight, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sneak preview of, am I doing let's see, did I share my screen? No. Let's share my screen. Okay, so we're going to be going into I'm giving you a preview of what you are going to learn some things about as we move into the case study sections. So we've got group number 1, who is going to be doing OPG, Ontario Power Generation and the fossil fuel phase out. You can't read it? Okay. Because you not see it? Let's try again. Can people see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go OPG, Ontario Power Generation, fossil fuel phase out is going to be one thing you're going to learn a little bit more about. Group number 2 is going to do organic waste management and diversion and then biogas as a possible solution. So we're going to learn a lot more about organic waste in Toronto or Ontario, depending on what the scope. I would recommend Toronto. Just keep your scope a little bit more narrow. You'll have an easier time. The group number 3 is going to be introducing us to the Attawapiskat community and De Beers, Canada, and the situation taking place in that community. Group 4 is going to be introducing us to the Site C situation in British Columbia. Group 5 is going to be doing a lot of education for us on blockchain and climate pros and cons. Just for group 5, keep in mind, you don't necessarily, if you don't have enough research to know whether it's going to be a climate champion or climate villain, you can easily just kind of go on the pros and cons. It just means that we're at the stage now where we better understand the implications of kind of big, huge servers and blockchain sort of situations. And what are the climate implications? In many ways, what you're doing is you're applying a climate lens to that sector as a whole. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is going to be one other thing we're going to learn more about. Highway 413 and the Bradford Bypass, and addressing flood and water contamination risks in Canada, in Toronto. So we have 8 groups, and I am going to set you up into breakout groups right now. I'm going to stop the share. And we are going to go into, we're going to go there for, how long do you guys think would be helpful to have these group discussions for planning for assignment number 2? Do you think 20 minutes, 25 minutes? What do you think? What do you? Okay, so let's make it for 25 minutes. And then we're gonna go into, after we do that, I'll pull you guys all back from the breakout rooms. And does everybody know what group they are in? Has everyone written down their number?
Oh.
No? Okay,
Oh,
so
no.
let me just kind of do it again. I'll put it in the, I'll get that organized so that you can, it's hard to keep track of, but group number 1 is Ontario Power Generation fossil fuel phase out. Group number 2, organic waste management in biogas in Toronto. Group number 3, I'm gonna get the flow on this on my tongue at some point in time. I will, after I say it like probably 15 times, get the flow on my tongue. Ottawa Piscat and De Beers. That was group number 3. Group number 4, Site C Dam. Group number 5, blockchain server farms, Climate Champion or Climate Villain. Group number 6, Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Group number 7, Highway 413 and the Bradford Bypass. And group number 8 is addressing flood and water contamination risks in Toronto. So everybody got their group number now?
Mhm.
Yeah? All right, perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make breakout groups. Yes, I did. I am going to, I'm not going to assign it. So I'm going to close that. I'm just going to recreate 8 groups. I'm going to assign automatically and I'm going to let participants choose rooms. Okay. So remember which group you're in and then just choose the number, group 1 through 8. There's 8 breakout groups. And
Gabby?
then, yep.
I have a couple questions about the assignment, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I don't. Would this be a good time?
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to understand, are you expecting us in our presentation and report to explicitly break things down in terms of the frameworks we talked about, W5 just conservation, et cetera, or is that possibly just supposed to be part of the work we do in creating the presentation and understanding the issue?
How, like, let's just say, for example, if it is lens, it's a different ways you would look at it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying like in this assignment, you can kind of specifically pull that out in terms like, oh, this is the just conservation framework to kind of make sure that I've got it in my head that when I'm kind of going through it, you use these frameworks and you can use that. You would never do that if you were actually giving a real presentation to stakeholders. You wouldn't say, I'm going to use the just conservation framework now, and this is what it tells me when I apply that just conservation framework. So I don't, if you find it helps you to keep you focused and your slide focused by saying, this is the W5 framework on this one slide. By applying the just conservation framework, we identified some additional areas of insights that we wanted to share with the group. That's totally fine. As long as it's covered, I don't care how you cover it.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wasn't sure. After the presentation you showed where they did basically list all of those things and go through it, I started to wonder, but originally I was thinking we were going to use those things in our research.
Yeah, and you would use those things in your research for sure. It might just, if you wanted to, like, it sometimes just helps to have the 3 slides with 3 different kind of frameworks and then additional information that they all provided. Now, I want to keep in mind that about 50 to 60% of your insights will come from the W5 framework. You'll come up with a fair amount there. But the goal on it is to see how applying different frameworks give you additional insights. And I would love to see how that happens in the research and as you're advancing your case study, the case study. So that's one of the reasons why you can kind of highlight it and say, using the just conservation framework, we've got some additional insights that we would like to share with you. But you don't have to. Just make sure that you are using those frameworks to look at the situation in different ways. And the reason you wouldn't have to use it because when you're doing a presentation on your case, presenting your case study to your stakeholders, you wouldn't use that. You would just be sharing the main insights that you want them to get out of your presentation.
Yep.
I hope I didn't complicate it even more.
No, I think you're saying we can go either way, basically. We can be explicit or not, but it might be a good idea to incorporate it at least partly into the presentation if it shows how we got to certain conclusions.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Right?
that would be good, actually, yeah. But you don't have, like,
Um,
again, to me, the main point is that you're applying different lenses and that you're not
Yeah.
just sticking, you're not just sticking at the superficial W5 framework. Because we all
Sure.
tend to use the W5 framework in our analysis, but I find the other frameworks help you look at it from different perspectives.
Right. And okay, another thing for the annotated bibliography, do you want to see it divided by each group member or just all grouped
No, you
together in
could
one
just
thing?
all together is fine. Yeah. Because it's
Okay,
all going to be the same mark for everybody. So I don't need to know who did what. That's not important to me.
gotcha. Thanks.
Zara? Oh, no
Thank
problem.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to know for the table of content, is it we're supposed to do a rough draft of our table of content, but I wanted to know if there should be a rationale for that. Yeah.
So if you looked at, in the assignment instructions, the table of content, the high level is already provided there. What I'm
Yeah.
looking for is the main bullets that you're going to try and get across in each of those sections.
Okay.
So give me at least a good couple of bullets to know what you're going to try and communicate in each of those areas, and any additional kind of areas of your presentation that you would like to share with the class.
Okay, thank you.
The only one thing I'm going to tell everybody to avoid, please don't just send me back the table of contents I already gave you and say that that's your table of contents. It has happened in the past. But it doesn't give me any indication that you actually are digging into those pieces. So that's what I'm looking for. What's the bullets in each of these sections that you're going to make sure that you want to communicate to your classmates? Does that make sense? Great. Hannah.
Yeah, sorry, I had issues with my computer, so I don't know if this was answered previously, but how long is too long for what we're handing in today? Because I kind of realized that instead of having the bullets and then kind of what I'm going to be describing or talking about in the bullets,
Yeah,
I just kind of started writing, and so I've got quite a bit, but I don't want to have too much.
and is this too much for the annotated bibliography or too much for the table of contents?
Too much for the table of contents, I think.
You know what? I don't think you need to worry about it being too much.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not going to penalize anybody, but feel free. You don't have to do it as a narrative. You can do it as just bullets. Right? Like, it doesn't have to be a whole narrative. Your report, when you submit your report, that will be your narrative. But right now, for a draft table of contents, all I need is the bullets that you're going to be your main points that you're going to try and get across to the class in each of those sections. So you don't have to overdo it on that one. And you mentioned today. Is it actually today that it's due? Did I do that?
Is it midnight tonight or tomorrow?
Oh, wait a sec.
Because I've seen 18th and 19th.
You're right. It was due week 6. Yes. Okay. So everybody's okay with that, right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Time flies when I'm having so much fun.
Tomorrow might be better because it was a hectic week, I think. Yeah.
If you guys want the weekend, that's fine by me. Do you guys want the weekend?
Sure.
Yes,
I'll make it due, like Tuesday. That's fine by me. I'll send an email out with everybody for Tuesday.
great.
Okay. Avery.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So in terms of handing it in, I know like when we hand it in through Blackboard, like, so we each hand in a separate copy of the assignment,
No,
or we,
just one person can send it in. Although
Okay.
the only one problem I have with that, help with Blackboard is that when it's a group assignment, it doesn't really Blackboard's not terribly conducive to giving marks back. So I'm just going to send you guys emails back rather than using
Okay.
Blackboard for tracking the marks.
awesome, okay, thank you.
Christelle?
Yeah, I'm confused. I thought this assignment was just the annotated bibliography, but you want it, but it's under the table of contents?
Yeah, so it's annotated bibliography and the draft table of contents for today's assignment. Well,
Okay.
for this assignment.
All right, cool.
And again, keeping in mind, the draft table of contents is like the headliners are already provided as part of the assignment instructions. What I'm looking for is the main points in each of those sections that you think is really important to get across to the class.
Should we use, or can we use quotes and a bit of a summary, or just the summary?
I think just use the summary.
Okay.
Yeah, just use the summary on that one. Yeah. It's a planning tool to help you kind of keep your focused, so you don't go on tangents like I do.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Gabe?
Yeah, sorry, another thing. Okay, so I'm a bit confused now because I thought you had said in a previous class that those headings in the description of the table of contents were actually just there to guide us, but that we were making our own headings. And so what my
those you can make
Okay.
your own headings, like they may not fit
Okay.
perfectly into what you're trying to communicate with your case study. So please feel
Okay.
free to change those main headings if you think there's a better main heading that you're trying to get across. Those are just guidance kind of stuff. But I do want to have each of those kind of sections kind of highlighted.
Yeah, for
If
sure.
it's not applicable to your case study, like if you think like, I don't really have anything, then just put that as the bullet. Just say, you know what, this doesn't really kind of like apply to the case study that I chose for this assignment.
So my group, we actually have already made the table of contents so far, and we did completely different headings, but we just went through everything you had and we tried to make sure we had it all covered within there.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as it's all kind of covered in there. What you choose to call the headings or anything like that, that's okay. No problem. That's not part of the that's not part of it. It's more this kind of making sure the content and the structure is all there.
Right.
Hannah?
And yeah, sorry, is there going to be a Blackboard submission portal, or are we
Yes, I'm
sending
going
it
to
to
set
via
that
email?
up. Yeah,
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
I will set that all up. All right, perfect. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break you into the 8 groups. Does everybody still remember their number, their group number?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let you all choose the group that you go to. It is now 4:08, so let's just make it this 4:10. We will go into a 20, let's go for 20 minutes. So then let's just make that 4:30. And then we will have a 15-minute break. So we'll reconvene into the large group. I will pull you back from the breakout groups at 4:30, but then we'll have our break after that. And then we'll reconvene here at 4:45. Does that sound okay?
There were a couple other questions, I think, Gabby.
Oh, good. Sorry. Yeah. Is it in the chat?
So there were some hands up. They've gone down.
Sorry,
Oh,
quick.
yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, just a quick question. The intro, it says to have a little brief of an intro of to introduce your case study and why it's important or relates to environmental justice. Is that included within the table of contents, or do you want a little something besides?
Put it as part of your table of contents.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
no problem. Great. Okay. So we'll go into the breakout groups. Then we'll also, when we come back, then we can also have dedicate some time to getting through additional questions that come up in the group as well. And it doesn't always have to be related to this assignment. It could be related to the presentation and the report, or the role-playing game part of it. So it could be part of that too. So if you guys have additional questions that come up in the group discussions there, then we can discuss that then too. All right. So I'm going to put the group 8. I'm going to open all the rooms, and then you just choose which room you go into. All right. See you at 4:45, or else, well, I'll see you at 4:30, and then we'll see you again at 4:45.
I don't know why I don't have access to breakout groups. It's
Yeah,
not
where does that show up?
Okay, let me see if I can set you. Zara, which number are you in?
6.
6? Okay.
Yeah.
Does it let you go in now? Yeah. Anyone else need help?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm in group
And
1.
what group are you going into?
Group 1.
Anthony, I know you're doing your project on, or Gwen, okay, 3. Oh, I put you in the wrong group. You're gonna, okay. So I'm gonna move you to 3. Sorry, I messed up that one. Okay, so you should do that. Hannah, you're working on your own. Do you want to just go into a group on your own, or you just want to kind of turn it off and then?
I maybe I want to chat with you just really briefly, just to make sure I'm on the right track.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Rebecca, what group would you want to, what group are you in?
She's in 3.
3? Okay. Thank you. And Jeff, what?
I'm in 1.
Okay, perfect. Jess, I'm going to put you into 1.
Thank you.
Gabby, I think the pop-up keeps disappearing on me. Would you mind re-inviting me to group 3?
Group 3? Yeah, for sure. Sorry, was that Hannah?
That was
No,
Rebecca.
that was Rebecca. Exactly. Thanks.
I can go to group 1. Jeff.
Jeff, sorry, gotcha.
Thank you.
Jacqueline, I don't have you. What group do I need to put you in?
Part 3.
3.
Hello, sorry.
3. Okay. And then Anthony and Hannah, you guys are doing it individually, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I still have Rebecca here.
Sorry.
Okay. So, Anthony, do you have any questions that you have for your assignment?
No, I think I'm good.
You're good? Okay, do you want to just kind of like, I guess, kind of, do you want, you don't need to go into a break on your own or anything like
No, I'll just
but,
work on my own for a few minutes.
yeah, okay. How about you, Hannah? Are you okay?
Yeah, I think so. So I know that you saw my email yesterday, and I think
I sent you a whole bunch of resources.
Yeah, I saw that.
From Credit Valley Conservation and from Green Infrastructure Ontario Coalition, but amazing resources from there.
Yeah, I saw that. They were super, super helpful. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think I'm doing well. I've, like I said earlier, I was worried that I had too much info, but I think
and that will happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what, I used a little bit of a trick for that is when I find that I've gone through 3 or 4 or 5 resources and I'm learning nothing new, I sort of kind of use that, like, stop, enough with the research.
Okay. Well, because it's not even the research, it's under the headings. It's, I basically have already started my report. I'm probably almost halfway done at this point. So I think I'm definitely going to condense a little bit because I don't want to give you too much to read, because I know you've got a lot of other reports that you've got to read. So I'm going to do my best to summarize and condense.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay. Jacqueline, I haven't been, I'm gonna try, did I get you into?
You put me for, well, it says here you're inviting me to group 3.
Okay.
I
Which group do I need to move you? 1?
I don't know. Is it possible? Okay. This is just for a practice exercise, right? It's not like the actual group that you're.
No, this is the actual group that you're working with.
Okay. No, so I'm not a part of any of those groups, and I think they all have their.
Oh, so you don't have a group?
No.
Okay, so then the question then comes in, did you want to join another group, or did you, the only 2 groups that you could have a choice to join is probably the ones that have opening. Sorry, I'm just going to pull this. Where is that list of the, what did I do with it? Do you have a topic that you want to do it on your own?
Not really. I'm kind of clueless, to tell you the honest truth. I'm just like.
Because the only other options are available are you can touch base with Anthony or Hannah.
Okay.
They're both doing their group work individually.
Mm-hmm.
All the other groups are kind of full up. The other one that you might be able to join as well is the blockchain climate champion or climate villain.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that one. It seems a little bit.
Okay, so you don't want that one. Are you interested in the Highway 413 and Bradford bypass?
Do you have any other suggestions for any others that I could do? I mean, I really don't want to.
You doing it individually? There's huge amounts. Have you checked out the Environmental Justice Atlas?
No. Do you have time to talk after class?
Well, let's go into but what you like, what would be something that's interested you, something that you've had a question on?
Like I mentioned before, like at the beginning of class when we were doing your introductions, environmental justice wasn't something that I was really into or anything. It was what was left and I needed an elective. So I took it, right? I know I should have an open mind and try to embrace new things, and it does. It would be beneficial to like my program and everything and to future work, but
so give me a suggestion of something that does interest you, something that has made you curious.
I don't know. When it comes to the environment, I can't really say, that. Okay, I guess maybe our water scarcity. I don't know.
So what if it's not like, what would be like, I think that I always prefer and try to find things that people are interested in. So if you give me something that you're interested in, I could probably find you an angle for the environmental stick that you could use for it.
I guess our gardening, our food, or how our food comes in or whatever. I don't know, the impacts like pesticides and whatever have on I don't know.
So you can kind of go into discussions on food deserts within urban environments. You can go into that as an environmental justice issue. There's certain kind of areas of our community that don't have access to fresh produce in the same way as other neighborhoods, or if you had access to, good transit or good car, you could actually go get you what you need to do. But there's a lot of sections of our communities that don't have adequate kind of fresh places for food. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's one you could do. You can do looking at it from the perspective of you could look at it from the perspective of the agricultural sector and its role in eutrophication. So looking at it from the kind of like using Lake Erie, and Lake Erie's eutrophication issues are related to the agricultural sector. So you could look at agricultural fertilizer runoff.
I think the first one is food deserts. Probably just as simple as it can get for me, because it's like, yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you do food deserts then?
Sure. Oh, yeah. But I still wanted to speak to you if I could, like off the air. Where?
Yeah, for sure. Like, why don't we wait until the end of class and then we'll do it then?
Okay.
All right, sounds
So
good.
food deserts, yeah, familiar.
Yeah, so I was good. So start use this time to do a little bit of research to see what you can find. And then if you have issues and stuff like that, you can give me then we can chat about that afterwards.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, so let's do this and I'll just stay here.
Okay.
Hey, folks, do you need more time?
I think we're okay.
I think we're good. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to go around to the check and round, but you guys can go on your breaks and then I'm going to shut down the breakout rooms as well. But I'm just going to check and make sure. I don't want to break it out and if people still need more time. But you can
Awesome.
just head on your break if you want then.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Gabby.
Good.
All right, see y'all.
How's it going?
It's good.
Do you guys need more time?
We would take a few minutes if other teams are taking it. I think we're pretty easy.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to kind of just make sure, see, I didn't want to break up the breakout groups if people are still need more time. All right.
Yeah, thanks.
No
Thank you.
worries.
Oh, there she is.
I'll just broadcast to everybody that can take a break time. And then I'll leave the rooms open and I'll break them up. It's 4:45 when break time's over.
Hey, Gabby, our group has a question for you later. It's specific to our case study, but if you prefer we ask it later, we can.
Hey there.
Hey.
Did any kind of questions come up in the group that we should just get into?
I had a pretty minor question. For the annotated bibliography, do you care if it's in a paragraph or point form?
No, either way is fine.
Okay.
And often in the annotated bibliography, the normal kind of thing is that it wouldn't be in point form. It would be in that kind of abstract sort of style.
Yeah.
But one of the things to keep in mind, it wouldn't be like just stealing the abstract from the report. Let's just say in academic research, it wouldn't be kind of stealing their abstract and throwing it in there. It would be your abstract on what it is in this reference that is of value to you.
Yeah, understood. Thanks.
Rebecca?
Hey, Gabby, it's a little bit more specific to our case study, the question that came up in our group. So with regards to unintended consequences, our group is doing well actually with trying to figure those out. The only thing is we're not quite sure if we're on the right track about what that means. So with our case,
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the potential unintended consequences for us, if you're saying we're going to talk about it, it's okay, but it was actually exploring the effects on human health based on like the mining actions of the project because of the mercury in the water. So we weren't sure. We were confident that this was an unintended consequence, but we weren't sure.
So you mean you don't know whether it would create mercury in the water or?
No, we do know that the level of mercury is definitely higher, which does end up impacting the wildlife and the fish. So our unintended consequence would have been effects on human health. So maybe getting sick from eating the fish, stuff like that. So we just want to make sure we're on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of say that that's like likely to be a very likely impact. So it wouldn't be necessarily something that's unintended. Like this is something that should have been considered because it's something that we know about now that if let's just say, we'll use the example in Quebec. What they ended up doing in Quebec is they flooded a whole bunch of areas to create reservoirs for hydroelectric dams. And then they flooded that area and made what used to be mercury that was not bioavailable became bioavailable once it started decomposing. And they didn't know that that was actually going to be the case when they did that. Again, at least they say they didn't know that. You could kind of say that, it's enough that you know that if you're going to be flooding waters and you've got biological matter that's being inundated with water, that mercury that's in the natural in the trees will now go into the water and become bioavailable into the fish section. So I would probably consider that a very likely issue that needs to be dealt with right from the beginning. But then if you look at from the kind of perspective, you'd say like, I don't know, maybe there's some unintended consequences that this would actually have. Like you could say, we don't know exactly. The unintended consequences could be that you don't know what health effects this would have at these concentrations on the population. And so that's something that you would then put first flagging, additional research required here.
Okay, sounds good. That actually does help a lot because we were thinking that that could be something that was already explored because you should already know that it's going to impact people and the fish and the wildlife, but we just weren't sure how to approach it. But at least we got clarification now, and that helped a lot.
Yeah. I mean, they might like the engineers in the Hydro-Quebec could say like, well, we didn't know that it was going to become bioavailable, but now we do know that. So they can't use that excuse anymore.
That makes sense. Thanks, Gabby.
No problem. Any other questions? All right, so I will send an email around just for everybody, just to kind of the new deadline for it being Tuesday. I won't be looking at it this weekend anyway, so it's no issue to me. I'm definitely going to take this weekend off. So I will not be marking, so you have until Tuesday, no problem. All right, so we're gonna go into, I wanted to do a little bit of brainstorming with you. And one of the things I've been kind of like throwing around and kind of trying to wrap my brain around is, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, and I would been flogging braiding sweetgrass to you guys as well. But one of the things that I think is really inherent in our climate change challenge is that our society is not set up for collective, like we definitely have, like our economic system is like individual rights and freedom, or individual consumption, or, you know, like our society is a very individualized society. And climate change is not going to be able to be solved with an individualized mindset. It is something that I see as the next evolution of what humanity needs to move towards. The good thing about it is that it's not like we're starting from scratch here. There are a lot of kind of learnings from other cultures that we can bring into our society that can help us kind of navigate this human evolution that we need to do, to think more collectively, to think more long term, to think with more connections and interdependencies associated with it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I did put that book as the textbook for it, because it's one of the first ones that really helped me make those connections between Indigenous knowledge, which is geared towards that longer term thinking of 7 generations, not only thinking about you as an individual, but you also, you still recognizing the individual and the rights of the individual, but also recognizing the interdependencies amongst a community and interdependencies amongst different communities. And in many ways, I kind of see this as, in some ways, which is, you know, it's not a fair thing or anything, but it's almost like, despite all the kind of, all right, can I be very frank here? Despite all the shit and terrible things that you know, that has happened to First Nations and Indigenous communities, as you know, our society came to North America, and it's not just North America, this is all over the world as a whole. But one of the things that's kind of the irony of this is, in some ways, they give us an indication or a direction for how we can move towards a different mindset that does bring our collectiveness together, our interconnections, are changing in the way we look at short-term versus long-term. And one of the things that's really kind of been a little bit curious for me is, like, we've never, ever in any of our government entities had a ministry for the future, or a ministry for kind of like looking at things from a longer term perspective. And I wonder if we did have that, like put that as a core value as our society, what kind of changes that would create in our kind of considerations of policies that we advance or what we do. And it's something that I wanted to play around with a little bit with you guys. So I don't know if you've ever seen, but in the last, I'll give them credit for this. In the last number of years, the liberal government has provided very, very clear mandates for each of the ministers on the expectations that and responsibilities, like their job description. They have a job description and it's all out there for everyone to see and track, and they're judged on their job description. So you have a bunch of mandate letters, and I'm going to share a couple of them so you can see. Sorry. The mandate letters are really good policy as far as I'm concerned. So here's all I'm going to put it in the chat. This is where you can find all the mandate letters, but I'm going to just choose, because that's just me, and I kind of going to go and choose the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. And I'm going to share my screen. And as you can see here, so this is Minister Guibert is the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Gives a lot of the blah, 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 set the context, all that kind of stuff. But really, the most important part of all of this stuff are these bullets. So you can see exactly what they're going to be judged on. So kind of in supporting colleagues across government on the Canada Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, the GHG reduction targets, that's definitely the mandate of this minister, to work with all Canadians and Net Zero Advisory Board. Again, we're speaking to the GHG implications, the connection between the different ministries. So this is actually one of the good ones. It's in the last time they did the mandate letters, the need for connections across interdepartmental or like the ministries to coordinate amongst themselves has never been very strong in these mandate letters. And it has improved this time when they were doing the mandate letters. So it's really good to see that. But it goes to speak that, you know, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change will not be able to achieve everything under this mandate without working with the other ministries. And putting that in the mandate letters for all of the two ministers keeps the checks and balances in the system, that they're kind of like, if you don't, no more working in your little government silos, work across your friggin' departments, work together, because you can't do this in isolation. You need to make sure that you guys are working in alignment. And that came out in the mandate letters as well. So they kind of speak to the methane emissions and that kind of the federal government's role in that. And then, you know, speaking of bringing in the kind of different ministerials on this one stuff. So I did want to kind of highlight, like, these are just some examples of like the bullets that you would use. And I wanted to send you all with a little bit of an exercise where I'm going to put you into groups. And I wanted you, sorry, just gonna get that. I wanted, you're gonna be, you're in the Prime Minister's staff and you are developing the mandate letters for a new ministry called the Ministry of the Future. And you are gonna put your bullets together. Christelle, you can't hear. Can you guys hear me okay? Check your mute on your machine. Okay, yeah, I've done that. I've kind of had my muting on. And then you're going to kind of come up with some bullets. There's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong on this kind of stuff. This is a brainstorming session about what do you think are the most important things to have as part of that mandate. So I do need people to kind of write this out because we are going to do a collective gathering of bullets that you come up with. So I need someone in the group who's going to help to make sure that they're writing down the bullets. And then we're going to share that in the chat when we come back from the session. Does that sound okay for you guys? And have fun with this. Like, you get to tell a new minister what to do, and enjoy that. It's a nice. It's a good feeling, especially since you're telling them what to do. It's not that you have to do it. Yeah, I can put some. I'll put some kind of challenges. Does anybody have any kind of questions that they'd like to dig into before we break into the groups on what would the mandate of a Ministry of the Future mean? But you see in the mandate letters, they do a little bit of a blurb, kind of like why this is important and all that kind of stuff. In many ways, you can kind of like have a discussion in your groups. What value do you think a Ministry of the Future would serve? Why do you think it's important? How would it work with all the other departments? Why is this something that's really important for something that, why this should exist? Why should this ministerial position exist? So have a little fun with that. It's not an assignment, it's a brainstorming session. Christelle?
Oh, I was just going to actually answer your question. It's like when you're driving, if you don't have an idea about where you're going, the chances of getting into an accident are greater. Like if you're not looking like 10 seconds ahead, right? When you're driving, and we never seem to be looking 10 seconds ahead or 10 years ahead or 20 years ahead. we're always in damage control mode. And it's almost like that's what they want. It's like, oh, this is a crisis and that's a crisis. And so a minister of the future would have us looking way down the road. at
Yep.
goals.
Yep. So we're not busy looking at our map and then crashing into things.
Exactly.
Or less likely to. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put you into, how many are there folks here? So I'm gonna put you into 3 groups. So they're small enough to have everybody kind of engage in the group. Does that sound okay? And we're gonna do it for about 20 minutes and then we'll come back. And then just have someone who either, if someone can volunteer to just take notes to kind of like the mandate letter so we can throw that into the chat afterwards. But we're going to be working collectively to develop a mandate letter. That sound okay? All right.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go, I'm going to recreate. I'm going to create 3 groups. I am going to assign automatically, so it's random. And I'm going to recreate. And I'm going to open all rooms.
Gaby, do we go to another room or do we just stay here?
Give me 1 sec. Sorry, did it not work?
Oh, no.
No? Okay,
No, I didn't.
I'm just gonna move you to group. Okay, I'm gonna move you to group 2.
Sure.
Oh, I went to a group, but I just got sent back.
Okay, so I'm gonna move you to, I'm just gonna move you to that one.
Room 2?
Yeah,
Okay,
Try
so
that.
I join it.
yeah.